because I'm going to go dark for a second here.
All right, good morning, everybody. So today we have a very special guest, Scott Brown with OVM Financial. Scott is one of our preferred lenders, and he works with several of our clients and anybody that is looking for any type of mortgage product. So good morning, Scott. Welcome.
Good morning.
Morning, Scott. Can you guys see me yet or no? Am I
No.
dark?
No.
Okay.
Sorry, we're always having technical difficulties.
Well, no, I'm trying to just share it on my Facebook page. So when I do it on my phone, I go dark for a minute. So hang on one second and let me share. All right, live now. All right, so Zach, you can monitor all the Facebook pages, right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Tell me when you can see me. Can you see me?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning,
Happy
Steve.
Monday.
Happy Monday.
So today we're going to talk with Scott, like Zach mentioned, and there's so much going on right now in the real estate industry and specific to lending. So if anyone has any specific questions with regards to lending, Scott definitely will be able to answer those for you. And if you missed this, and we're live at 11 on Monday, we're going to be posting this on YouTube. So you follow us on YouTube, just put Give Back Team in your search bar and you will find us. And we've been doing this for the last 2 weeks. So there's a lot of great topics that we've been discussing along the way. So continue to follow us on YouTube and you'll see this as well as some additional videos that we've already done. And we're going to come to you live at 11 every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on our Facebook group. So let's kick it off. And Scott, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself so everyone gets to know, like, and love you too.
Okay, great. Scott Brown, OVM Financial is my company. I've been in the mortgage industry for 20 plus years as a loan officer. I'm a producing loan officer and a branch manager with OVM. Been around through now 2 bouts of craziness in the industry, if you will. Lots of experience and knowledge in the government loans and all loan types, really. Do a lot of government loans, but yeah, been around a long time, seen a lot of things, and have a lot of experience and creativity in the business. And so that's a little bit of me in a nutshell, if you will.
So what states are you licensed in? So as we're talking, because we're in Northern Virginia, but you also are licensed to do business in other states as well.
I sure am. I'm licensed myself to do business in Maryland, Virginia, and North Carolina. As a company, OVM is licensed in those states as well as South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, I think Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken. We did have Texas, but we let that go because Texas has crazy lending laws, and we decided to let that state go. But we are most of the central and southern East Coast.
That's awesome. So that's great because you can answer questions relative to stuff that we're not necessarily dealing with just in Virginia here too. So, so Zach, you can monitor all the questions if we're getting any coming in, right?
Yep.
All right, perfect. So why don't we just kick it off a little bit, Scott, by talking about, there's so many changes right now with what's going on with the industry. So we do in our area have a higher percentage of VA buyers. I mean, AJ, you're one of our top buyers agents. Would you agree that that's the most frequently used loans with our buyers now?
Absolutely, especially in this market that we're in Northern Virginia with all the different bases in and around us.
Yeah.
So what's going on with the VA loans right now? Can you speak to, the changes and the things that are taking place right now?
Well, if I could start with a little bit of positivity, the good thing that's going on, number one, is VA loans really haven't changed for the most part. The only significant things going on currently with the VA kind of more affect the jumbo VA market. And that's just in regards to rates. Anything that has any significant sense of risk to it, outside your standard primary residence, non-jumbo loan size really hasn't, we've rebounded from a little bit of a rate crunch that we went through, a rate hike, if you will, a couple of weeks ago in those particular products. Some of the things that are more high risk, though, are still seeing some significant changes and significant increases in rates. But OVM has found some good alternatives, especially for our jumbo VA loans and some other options where we can sell those to some different markets that have allowed us to be very competitive with the rates on those products. But overall, VA really hasn't seen, from a products guideline standpoint, significant changes. One thing I can say that I've seen myself that's affected VA buyers is more with people with orders and PCSing being put to a halt, if you will. I have several customers that are in limbo from that standpoint, and we just have to work through it with them and, figure out, what the best course of action with those customers. But from a product standpoint, VA has largely been untouched and unscathed through these problems. I'll say this, the market seems, and you guys can answer this, but the market seems to have stayed pretty hot. That's a huge positive, that I can mention.
For sure. So AJ, I mean, why don't you speak to that as far as how busy the market is with your buyers right now?
The market is certainly busy. There are some buyers that have uncertainty because they don't know where the market is going in terms of the rates are fluctuating to what Scott is saying. But relatively speaking, there's a lot of buyers out there that are still looking to buy. As a matter of fact, I'm actually heading out at noon to go show a property myself, so I'll probably be leaving out at 11:30. But yeah, it's really busy. So Scott, to ask you a question that's always asked, and I'm sure you get the same question when we introduce you to somebody, what are rates looking like on average for you as today's market stands?
Generally speaking, I like to always talk about rates not involving pain points.
Right.
Because, there's a lot of companies out there that'll sell these low rates, but it costs thousands of dollars to get that rate. And especially in this market where the sellers generally aren't giving concessions to the buyer, the buyer's already coming up with closing costs. So right now, without paying points with good credit, the buyer should be looking at something in the very low threes, 3.125, 3.25%. Somebody with mid-tier credit is probably looking more like at the 3.5 range. I will say one thing that has affected VA loans is anything under a 620 credit score has probably been, for the most part, put to a stop for the moment. So those buyers, the rates aren't even available, and options to buy aren't even available for those type of a buyer right now.
So Scott, could you touch on, you just mentioned something on the 620 credit score. I was speaking to a friend of mine, and they particularly said all government-backed loans, their credit criteria has changed because the secondary market isn't picking those loans up from a buyer standpoint.
That's 100% accurate. As a matter of fact, almost every company that I have, friends at that I've worked with in the past, I've reached out the end of last week to just to kind of get a temperature of what other companies are doing. And for the most part, everybody that I've talked to has raised their minimum credit score requirement from anywhere from a 620 to a 640. We as a general rule of thumb have raised to a 640, but I do have options down to 620, more of a broker type thing, so that we can still get those loans done. But absolutely, that is one thing that's changing, and I can speak to why for sure. To put a little sense of understanding to it, and not to raise major concerns that this is what the industry is going to forever. It's not. But again, it's speaking back to the thing I spoke about on risk. Someone with a lower credit score is a higher risk, and that's just the way it is. And so the banks see those folks as more risk, and they're just putting a stop to the secondary market's putting a stop to that loan for the moment, just to kind of see what happens, how the economy falls out through this crisis. I think the big concern is with employment, is from what I've seen, is people losing their jobs over this or losing income. And so that's why you see that's an easy adjustment to make with credit score for the industry, to mitigate risk. They can't really say, well, these types of jobs, we're not going to do loans for these particular people because that's against the law. But what they can say is they can say you got to have a higher credit score just to mitigate some of the risk. That'll change back. It's not a permanent move. Once the market gets a sense and the investors get a sense of how the economy is going to shake out from all this, and frankly, when people are going to start to go back to work is what they want to see.
Right.
I think crossing my fingers, I think we'll see that start to change back. I'd say probably sometime in the summer, hopefully midsummer, not late summer. But for now, that's what we're left with. Yeah, for sure.
Right. And then there was also talks of, you touched on something else that I remembered I was going to ask you now. G, if you want to pick up while I think about the next question.
AJ just had a taco moment. Like
Right, literally a taco moment.
If you notice, his name is the Taco King, Scott. So he's, if anyone as an aside needs to know a good taco spot, AJ has actually informed everyone that a taco truck will be at the Woodbridge Costco later today, just as an aside. But we kind of shiny squirrel. We shiny squirrel a little bit. But so Scott, one question. So, last week when I was talking to a couple of other lenders as well, I mean, and you and I touch base all the time, but there was a concern for sellers. It seems like where the interest rate kind of has been kind of bopping all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And so for some lenders on Friday, they were saying that interest rates for a VA loan had gone actually over 4%. And so buyers right now are not locking the rates when they go under contract for a purchase. And they're actually kind of floating, going through the underwriting process and trying to even get to clear to close close to it before they actually will lock a rate. Can you explain that? Because I know we're getting a lot of questions as far as what does that mean if they don't lock the rate right away? And, what are you seeing, as far as in your experience over the last 2 weeks of, as we're diving further and further into the COVID-19 situation, what is happening with rates? And are you locking VA buyers? Are you locking buyers in general right now? Or what are you guys doing?
Those are great questions. So I can, kind of explain to you and everyone online here from a standpoint of how I'm advising my buyers in my pipeline. So when the rates started to go up about 3 weeks ago, one thing I will say, when rates change, they change up very fast and they come down very slow. Okay. And they never tend to move in one direct direction, if you will, up, down, or going up. It's kind of a sawtooth action. And kind of what I mean by that is when rates started to go up 3 weeks ago, it was a boom down. We saw a little reprieve, a boom down again, and those things can quickly snowball out of control. And I had plenty of buyers. I had 20 plus buyers in my pipeline that were closing anywhere between the end of March and, mid-April, that were kind of caught in that scenario of, hey, I pick up the phone, rates are getting worse. They're asking what to do.
Right.
Do we sit tight? Do we take advantage? My course of action is always to take advantage, even if it's not what you would hope for, wherever rates are. Now, once they slip further out of control, at some point, you're kind of stuck waiting and watching. And so I had buyers in both boats. I had some that chose to just jump on the rates before they got too bad, and we got them locked in, and they were happy to be locked in and watch it go even further south, if you will. And then I had the customers that were like, no, that's not what I had hoped for, and I'm going to sit tight and wait, and that's fine too. I was okay. In some instances, I'm not okay with that, just because if rates are going higher in a normal market, if you will, under normal circumstances, that's because long-term projections are sending them there. In this situation, this is a very, very dynamic, moving situation that, for all intents and purposes, is not. It's not forever. We're in a very unique, temporary setting that there's not long-term economic factors that are driving rates in one particular direction. It's a virus, that nobody has a grasp on. So, I knew in my eyes that at some point the market was panicking, and at some point that it would recover. And thankfully, what happened was they went down the rates went up for about 2 weeks, and then we saw the market kind of get a grasp of itself. We saw the stock market kind of level out and start to come back up. And that's when we got a nice little bump back down in rates, and I was able to lock in the majority of my folks. And, although rates didn't come back down to all the way to where they were, necessarily, at the end of the day, it came close enough that I could convince everybody to take advantage of where we were, that, hey, this may be the opportunity. And what we've seen since then, is even last week, we saw them come down. We saw them go back up temporarily. We saw them come down again. And then we saw credit score requirements start to be thrown in there. So, it's one of those evolving markets that buyer to buyer, I've just had to advise them the best time to take advantage and get locked in. And thankfully, everybody, was able to take advantage and get locked in, at a fairly good rate and, pretty close, if not in some cases, even better than where they were before. So yeah, there's definitely buyers out there doing that. From a seller standpoint, that can be scary because, the deal can go south quickly over that type of scenario. But again, we're all in this together, and, deal to deal, we're kind of figuring that out and making things happen. And I can say, thankfully, that I haven't had any fall apart, because of that. I was very thankful we got that reprieve last week and got the rates to come back down. As a company, what we've had to do is also reach out and find other investors, because day to day, some investors, they've raised their rates and don't want more loans. One of the things I'll say is that OVM was very poised to absorb this work from home market. And we already had 50% of our staff working from home naturally.
Wow, that's great.
We were able to transition the other 50% to work from home within a day and not miss a beat. We're making our closing dates. We're still closing loans in 30 days, working through this evolving market. My point in saying that is and the problem with the industry right now, and this affects the investors, the big banks, and also the bigger lenders. You'll see like the Navy Feds and the USAAs, in many cases, they're not even taking loan applications right now. And the reason for that is that they were busy beforehand because of low rates, and they weren't equipped to send people to go work from home. They're on very limited staff right now at best with these big companies. And so that's part of what's throwing this market into such a crazy turmoil too. Okay.
So as far as the, everyone asks, well, what's my payment going to be? And this is, regardless of what's going on in the world right now, it's just a typical question. So when we're talking about rates and, fluctuation.
Hey, G, before you ask your question, I just want to piggyback off of what Scott just said with the rates going up and down, because I know we have a lot of viewers listening, and, to what Scott's saying, we don't want you to panic in terms of rates are going up or rates are going down. This is definitely still the perfect time to buy. From a buyer standpoint, because rates are still historically lower than they have ever been, for the longest time. And I think, Scott, you touched on that very well. So definitely, if you're in the market to still buy, please continue looking, because, rates are still low.
Yeah. And, I think I can not only piggyback on what AJ is saying, but maybe even jumped into where I think Ginger was going, and correct me if I'm wrong in answering this, but I think this will answer both of you a little bit. My advice to anybody that's coming in for pre-approval, where am I quoting them from a payment standpoint and rate standpoint? And then also, what's my advice on getting pre-approved and being out there in the market? Number one, the best thing you can do right now is be pre-approved, because when the right house comes along and the opportunity to lock in on the interest rate comes along, you're ready to go. If you try to, as a buyer, hold off on pre-approval, the house shows up you like, then you're scrambling with me to get pre-approved in a very busy market. I'll get to you quickly, but if you're already in the system ready to go, it's a much more seamless, quick process. So getting pre-approved right now is the number one thing to do. Be in my pipeline, be in AJ or Ginger's pipeline, whoever you're working with. And that way, when the right house comes available, we can take advantage of rates when they dip. You can jump on the right house. Now, if you find the right house and rates aren't as low as maybe they've been lately, maybe we have one of those temporary spikes. That's an instance where, number one, I'm going to probably quote you on a worst case scenario, and also quote you on a best case scenario. And that way, the in between, where you might end up on the high end, where you could end up on the low end. And then what you do is you get in my system, we process your loan, we get you underwritten, and we watch the rates to take advantage of a day that makes sense, and let me use my expertise and watch the market for you. That's what I promise to my clients is I've got a whole pipeline of people that aren't locked, that have just got under contract, and they're waiting for the ideal time, and they're relying on me to give the best advice of when to do that. And that's what I'm here for. You know, I've been in the industry a long time. I can't predict. I don't have a crystal ball where things are
I
going.
wish we all did. We'd be really rich if we did.
Right.
That's right. I'd be on Wall
Pre-quals,
Street.
Scott,
No,
and you
but,
can correct me on this. Like a lot of people are shy of getting a pre-qual because they're like, we're not ready just yet. Could you let them know how long a pre-qual actually is valid for?
Yep. So number one thing is that's the worst thing I can hear when someone says, I'm not quite ready, so I don't want to do that. I don't want to pull my credit. Well, that's the worst thing you can do is to wait. Number one reason why is let's get your credit pulled to make sure that there's no concerns that we can be addressing and fixing to put you in a better position to buy. Maybe there's something that can be paid off. Maybe there's something on the credit that we can be working on that you were unaware of, that we can be getting your score up while you're out there looking. If you wait and you find the perfect house, then we pull your credit and there's something to be fixed, then we're in a pickle, okay? So getting pre-approved, number one, is so important. I don't care if you're looking to buy in 2 weeks, 2 months, or even a year. Let's still get you pre-approved. Let's understand where your credit is. One of the biggest myths in this industry is that having your credit pulled hurts your credit. That is absolutely not true, especially when it comes to mortgages. When it hurts your credit to get your credit pulled is when you're running around town trying to open up multiple credit cards at one time. You're trying to open up credit cards and buy a car, you know, doing a lot of things. Just having your credit pulled for a mortgage does not hurt your score.
That's a really, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that is a really important point, because that is a big fear. And AJ, I know you agree with this. That is a very big fear that we hear from our clients or potential buyers, that I don't want my credit pulled. Like that's the first thing that people shy away from. But in reality, to your point, it's a really important, I always say we're the fun ones. We get to go shopping with you for the house, but the place that you have to start really is the lender, because that's going to let you know truly what your big picture is, make sure you're comfortable with the price point we're searching for, and that the payment's going to be something where you're able to live and eat in your house and not, you know, eat ramen noodles and not be able to buy furniture. So I do strongly, we always firmly believe that people should do that, you know, speak to the lender first. And you're saying pre-approved, but I just want to throw out there and ask you if you can explain the difference between pre-qualified and pre-approved, because there are two different things.
Well, you know, people interchange those terms a lot. You know, to me, all I do is a pre-approval. I don't do a pre-qualification. A pre-qualification is a phone call, you telling me what your credit score is and you telling me what your income is with no verification of anything, just to give you a ballpark idea of where you stand. Pre-qualification really to me means nothing. It's no good to go shopping with. You really don't know where you stand. It's all theoretical. I do true pre-approvals. I pull your credit. I want to see a pay stub at a minimum. I want to see those documentation, because that allows me to advise a customer best on where they truly stand without having issue if they do go find a house. They're putting yourself in the best position, not only in the seller's eyes, but as far as in the lender's eyes too, to make sure that we're giving you the best advice. So pre-approval is the only thing I do. I mean, I will have a theoretical conversation with someone if that's really what they want in the moment. But going back to the issue of getting your credit pulled, you know, not only does it not hurt your score, but any minor, you know, hits to credit score, a point here, a point there, the pros of having your credit pulled way far outweigh the con of a potential minimal score decrease by having your credit pulled. Because it's much more likely in my 20 years of experience to see someone negatively affected by waiting on their credit pull versus the positive of having it pulled and being in prime position, you know, to get things done and to know where they stand. And to AJ's note, to answer that question, I think you asked about how long the pre-approval works. Really, to me, I don't have a time frame that it expires. There's a certain time frame that the credit report is good for.
Correct.
Generally, that's between 90 and 120 days, depending on the loan type. However, if someone's had their credit pulled and overall their credit picture is pretty good, what I'm going to tell them is don't go make any major changes. And if they haven't found a house in that 120-day window, I'm not going to just run out and re-pull credit. At that point, I'm probably going to rely on the fact that they understand not to make any major changes to credit. And then I'm going to wait till they actually find a house. So if that's 200 days down the road, Yeah, when they start getting serious again and that 120 days is expired and they find a house and they're ready to make an offer, that's when I'll probably re-pull a credit report at that point, just to make sure for everybody's sake that they're still good to go. But to me, the pre-approval doesn't really have a time frame that ends, if you will. Okay.
Right. And to everyone that's watching, to Scott's point, for anyone that and I'm throwing Navy Federal and USAA under the bus completely. You know, they jump on there and I'm pre-qual to $600,000-$700,000 because they're not doing the checks that Scott is doing. So it's very important to get a lender that actually does the checks like Scott does, because then you know your true buying power as you leave the house. And because I don't want to start my car until I have a solid understanding of where you stand from a price standpoint.
Yeah, there's many times I talk to buyers that say, "Oh, I've been pre-approved," and I say, "Did you have credit pulled? Have you provided a pay stub?" And no. Oh, how did they know? Well, I told them what everything looks like. I clicked down the drop down that said my credit's fair, and I put in the amount of income. You know, and to that point, the honesty of it is where I see the customer hurt is a lot of times they're told a number that actually is nowhere near as high as they can go to. You know, so they've been told they can buy at 250 by Navy Fed or whoever it may be, and I get a hold of them. I'm like, "Hey, you can go to 400,000." You know,
Right.
So I see more negative effect than even where they're told they can buy higher. I mean, both instances happen, but I see a lot of times where they're given a number by many lenders.
Funny you say that. So when I first started in real estate, I got this client, happy as hell, right? $800,000, man. Let's go shopping. So I'm out there, right? My first $800,000 deal. Man, we're looking at houses. We found the right one, wrote the contract. Come to find out, he only qualified for 450.
Wow.
I was like, no way. And
Rookie mistake, AJ.
But that was USAA, right? I mean, they said we were pre-qualified 800, let's go. And all I saw was dollars.
You learn from your mistakes, though.
Well, absolutely.
Okay, so let's bring it to what's going on right now a little bit. So when we're talking about the appraisal process, now we've moved to pretty virtual, you know, and as agents, we always joke that, yeah, we have a physical office, but really our office is our front seat, you know, for all intents and purposes. So you can see, I'm sitting on my back deck in my backyard because it's so pretty. I didn't want to sit in my office at home. And AJ and well, Zach's in the kitchen, I think. I don't know where Zach is. He's got another office too, but so, you know, as far as being virtual and being able to do everything, you know, on the fly, we're definitely able to do all of that. But going virtual right now is an interesting thing when it comes to the appraisal process, because we have home inspectors that can do FaceTime tours. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening with appraisals right now, because there's such thing as a drive-by appraisal or a desktop appraisal.
Not to cut you off, G, but I think that's all getting ready to change in 2 hours. I think we're going down into a complete lockdown.
Well, let's let Scott talk about it, since he might be a little bit more in the know too. But what is the difference between all of that? Because I know right now we have a variation of what's going on, and you're in multiple states too. So can you talk to a little bit about what's going on with the appraisal process?
You know, honestly, I'll say that although I've heard grumblings of some changes, you know, where you guys are located in Northern Virginia, I think has seen more of an effect than even down here in Southern Virginia where I am. I haven't heard much coming out of other states. You know, if anybody did business in New York, I'm sure that it's completely different up there.
Yeah.
You know, I think we've escaped that total lockdown that, you know, as AJ said, may be coming. You know, but once that happens, I'm sure it's going to affect appraisals. I haven't seen a significant change. I have heard some, one thing I have seen is that it is taking a little bit longer to get appraisals back. I haven't been told any differently about them not being able to take interior pictures. If it gets to a point where the appraisers, you know, can't get into homes and all we can do is drive-bys, I'm sure it's going to significantly affect closings. That's a little scary to think about. You know, I don't really want to think. I think we've maintained at the level of lockdown that we're in and kept some semblance of a good marketplace. But if it gets too much of a lockdown and appraisers actually can't get into homes and things become totally virtual, I'm sure that the banks and investors are going to have a major issue with that. You know, they rely on those appraisers to be the eyes and the ears that these homes are in, you know, the shape they're supposed to be in, and the proper things are, you know, working properly and the house looks good and is not in disrepair. And there's, let's be real, there's only so much an appraiser can see virtually. And I'm
Right.
sure if we get to at a point where it all becomes too virtual, we're going to have some real challenges. I mean, not to get off track, but I think if we get to that point, we're going to have other issues beyond the appraisal. One being like closings, because there still has to be, even though they can e-record at the courthouse and things like that, there still has to be a customer and a title company or a notary person sitting face to face. And if we get to the point where that can't occur, then, they're not going to allow the closing to become completely virtual because they still need wet signatures and things like that. So getting off on a tangent, I think I haven't worried too much about the appraisal thing just because I think once we get to that point, there's other issues,
Right. I mean, I can say right now on one of my listings, I do have a VA appraiser going in, this afternoon. So I have found though that the VA, I guess, the typical time frame of when it's ordered versus, and when it has to come back, that they've really relaxed on that because I think that maybe the number of appraisers, from what I've heard, has lessened a little bit because some appraisers don't want to go into the interiors of homes right now. But I don't know if you've heard that too, if there's fewer appraisers that are actually doing the appraisals right now.
Well, I can tell you this, the panel of VA appraisers, age-wise, is much older than other types of appraisals. All the VA appraisers are up there. A lot of them are up there in age, and that just is what it is. And so I knew that was going to be some issue. I think you have quite a few of them that don't want to be out and about. And so it has limited the number of options available. I'll say that I haven't had major issue with VA appraisals in the time frames. I've had some on other loan types that I've had issue with, especially stuff that's more rural and hard to get to, but for the most part, I haven't been missing. I've had a couple of them that have reached back out and said, hey, I need 2 more days or 3 more days. Generally speaking, I get the appraisals ordered early enough that it allows us time for those little issues that haven't factored into affecting, closing dates. And so I haven't seen a major issue on that end of things.
So I think you just gave a key piece of advice there, though, for buyers and sellers that, get jumping on the timelines early. If people are buying and selling right now, I mean, I can tell you, we've listed 6 homes in the last week and all of which are under contract already. Yeah. So, sellers are selling, buyers are buying. Excuse me. I think pollen just attacked my throat. I'm sitting outside. So, but, so I would say, from a listing, more of the listing side, that's what I do, more listings than the buyers, and AJ does more buyers than the listings. But what we're trying to do is be as aggressive as we can on getting the due diligence done like that, ordering the appraisal right away, as opposed to in some, times of the year, we would actually, from the buyer side, wait until we get through the home inspection to then order the appraisal. But we're really pushing to order everything all at once and get everything done as quickly as possible in this, just this ever-changing time that we don't know, like you said, if appraisers stop going out, what happens then? And we will have effects as far as pushing timelines, because then the next step would be, the closing, which you did mention. So I can tell you it's kind of a unique thing even with the closings, because in Northern Virginia, all of the counties here are allowing for the e-recording, which is great. But we do have people who will go, to the client's house to do the signing. And we had one where they literally put the papers on the doorstep, and, the sellers opened the door, took the papers in, and they signed by, with a window between them, so that everything could be visually, done. But it's just, we're coming up with creative ways and solutions to get things done. But the appraisal thing is going to be interesting because, like you said, that they are the eyes for the loan, really, and for the buyer to make sure that the value is accurate and it's the home's portraying the way it needs to as required by the loan. So, but I'm glad to hear that you're not really seeing a slowdown on that yet, and hopefully it's not ever. But I guess it's just a daily thing that we'll have to kind of keep an eye on.
Yeah. And, to speak on the advantage of using myself in OVM, that's one of the things that I've always done with my buyers is I do order the appraisal without a check or a credit card from the customer. And number two, without waiting necessarily for the home inspection. And I can't tell you if I told you the bill that we have at the end of every month as a company on appraisals we pay for on deals that fall through, that's just how we choose to do business, because we want to be ahead of the curve. The advantage of being fast and taking the risk of spending money on deals that don't close is just part of what OVM does to benefit both the customer and our real estate agents, to make sure that we can meet, fast timelines, and not have delays. So we do take that risk, and we don't necessarily typically pass that cost along to the buyer. We eat that cost. If the deal falls through at no fault of the buyer, as long as they're going to go out and find something else and end up closing with us at the end of the day on something else, we don't pass the cost of that appraisal along if we have to pay it. And the appraisal's been done and the deal falls apart for some other reason. So that's an advantage in working with us, both from a real estate sales agent standpoint and a buyer.
So, and that's great, because, speed to getting things done is critical. And I know that you have a lot of, like you said, in-house people too. So communication with you guys has always been fantastic for all the deals that we've been working with you together on. So just a shout out to Scott Brown and OVM for.
I yet have to text him at 12 o'clock to see if I get a response at midnight.
So as far as we've touched base on VA loans, can you talk about FHA, conventional, what's going on with those right now too?
Yeah, so FHA has been about the same as VA. We've seen the credit score minimums come up a little bit. Other than that, no significant changes or concerns at this point. To parlay from the FHA into the bond programs, the VHDA.
Yes.
We have seen some major changes on the bond program standpoint. So to start, because we do business in North Carolina and Florida, they have similar bond programs to Virginia. Okay. In those states, we've actually had to stop closing loans on the bond programs because the guidelines have changed, that they're requiring a 90-day post-closing verification of employment. What that means is the investor, the lender, the state, through the bond program, is requiring that the buyer have a 90-day post-closing job verification to make sure that they haven't had any significant change in employment, lost their job, decrease in income, layoff, temporary layoff. And if one of those things happens, what happens is the bond program comes back to OVM and says, you've got to buy this loan back from us. That's too significant of a risk for our company. So we've had to basically say in those two states, we're going to halt closing any of those bond program loans for the time being. Word that I got yesterday from my CEO is that VHDA, we reached out to them directly and said, is there any chance that you guys are going to do this? And they have promised us that they're not. So we are still closing VHDA loans for the time being. Unfortunately, to mitigate some risk, we have had to raise our minimum credit score requirements. So that's the only change on VHDA. I don't have an answer of where that number is going to fall, but I'm thinking it's probably going to be somewhere around 660 is what we're going to require for the time being. So that's the only change to FHA, if you will, because the main primary program through VHDA is an FHA plus loan. So that is the one effect to FHA. From a conventional standpoint, again, we've not seen any significant changes to primary residence or second homes. We have completely stopped doing non-owner occupied, so investment loans cannot be closed at this point in time because the investors aren't buying them. Again, that goes back to risk. If someone loses their job, the first thing they're going to stop paying is their rental property.
Right.
So this is probably a good time to buy a beach property too. So they took all that away from us.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a second home, I'm fine. To be honest with you, if the person can qualify on that house as a second home versus it being a rental property, and the difference there being, do they need the rental income to qualify or not? If they don't need the rental income to qualify and they can close it on it as a second home, that's still in play right now. So we're good on that. But again, anything with major risk is being affected, and that affects primarily the non-owner occupied, and also some of the jumbo products we're having some challenges on the conventional side with those as well. Anything that carries any greater risk. Okay.
So when you say jumbo, can you tell everyone what that is?
So generally speaking, anything over 510,000 borrowed. So if you're buying $1 million house and you're not putting $500,000 down, that's considered a jumbo loan if you're borrowing anything above 510.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. And we
So-
still do have avenues for it. It's just it's been a little bit more complicated.
Mhm. Are there any other types of loans that you do with OVM?
USDA. We didn't speak of USDA, and we haven't seen any major changes to USDA. What USDA loans are, that's not specific to the buyer necessarily. There are income restrictions with it, but it's more specific to the property. The property has to be designated in a USDA eligible area. So up where you guys are, some things out in Stafford are, and then things south of there, Fredericksburg, and even south and west from there, Orange County out that way. Anything up in Woodbridge, Manassas is not. So it has to be the more southern and western properties. Okay.
So if you had to give 3 pieces of advice to a buyer that's looking to possibly get going right now on their process, what would the 3 pieces of advice you'd give?
I would say number 1, get pre-qualified, but pick a loan officer that you can actually speak to, that you can pick up the phone, that's got a lot of experience and can advise you and talk you through what's going on right now and give you the best course of action and a game plan, put a game plan in motion for you as a buyer. And again, that goes to, understanding the potential ups and downs in the market, finding what's best for you as a buyer. A perfect example, I had a young lady that was sent to me by someone that had come pre-approved from another company, and they were just talking 3% conventional, 3% conventional, and that's what she was programmed. And she came to me and I said, hey, listen, that's not the best product for you in this market, because although you do have good credit, that product with less money down on conventional, the rates are higher right now. I could give her 1.5% better interest rate on an FHA loan, and have her have a lower payment, even with the PMI, even though she had good credit, the payment was significantly lower. So I had to retrain her and reprogram her thought process. And so again, getting with someone that has multiple options available and programs, willingness to take the time to look through all those programs and find what's best for you as a buyer. And someone that you can get on the phone when you need them, get on the phone quickly, because again, it's we're in this weird market that it's very fast moving on you guys' side of things. Properties don't last long. There's still multiple offers. And then you've got this system on the other side for the lending that's kind of come to this, slow screeching halt in many instances. Well, it hasn't for me. And navigating through the changes, I can navigate those changes very quickly because I have years of experience. And so, again, getting with someone that has experience, the ability to talk to them and get them on the phone and have them be able to navigate all those changes and be able to keep up with what's going on you guys' side of things in the very fast-paced market. It's, that's probably what I see as the biggest challenge right now. And if you don't have a company that you can get the same person on the phone every time, that knows your deal, has talked you through it before, and you're not having to re-explain and get advice from a different person every time you pick up the phone, that's the best thing that I can tell somebody,
No, that's a great piece of advice. And it is nice when they can just call you, and you are very flexible. I think that's the key for a lender, is to be flexible, not 9 to 5, but the needs of the buyer are sometimes, 7 o'clock at night, or when it comes to AJ, maybe at midnight. I'm not sure.
I usually say about 8 to 8 every day, 7 days a week. I do have some flexibility on the far end of that I'll go till sometimes 9 or 9:30 at night. It just depends on the day. But generally speaking, 8 to 8, 7 days a week is when I'm available. I have to cut it off somewhere. I got the little ones.
You have to. Yeah, you have to. So I love always talking about like crazy stories. So can you give us what was some of the craziest things? And obviously you don't have to give names, but some of the craziest things that have happened to you just from the lending side of deals.
I generally don't have crazy things happen on my loans. I mean, I've had some really wild things happen from a sense of I had a customer who I pre-qualified, and I kind of got the sense she was looking for this $800,000-900,000 house. And I really got the sense in the transaction that she was full of it, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So come to find out, I did some snooping on her. And she was in the process. I had written a pre-approval letter, and she was in the process of they were negotiating a contract on like an $850,000 house. And I just got this sense that something wasn't right. She kept making this promise that she was going to be settling this lawsuit, and that's where her down payment was coming from. And, you know, she wrote the EMD check, but it bounced, but she was promising that she wrote it from the wrong account. And there was just really weird things going on. So I actually got online and did some snooping and looked her up and found her that she had been, she had committed fraud prior and had gone to court and been convicted. And so I actually picked up the phone and called. I found online her case officer for her parole, parole or whatever you call it, called them and said, listen, I've got this woman that I think is kind of running everybody down a rabbit hole and doing things fraudulently and really, is telling lies. And the case officer said, I appreciate the phone call. That sounds exactly like her. And I'm going to pick up the phone and call her right now. Well, she had written a fake check and she ended up going to jail again from this.
Oh my gosh.
So that's a crazy story.
That is a crazy
like
story.
a client that I actually worked with in the past.
Yeah. So, I've had people that I've been like, this is crazy. Like, it didn't seem like they should qualify for what they were trying to do. In reality, they really did, so it's weird reading people from that standpoint. And, but to get to not so crazy, I've got a guy right now that was about 6 or 7 days from closing on a VA loan. USAA had them all pre-approved and ready to go and sent them back to underwriting for a final clear to close. And they told him 7 days from closing, we can't do your loan. They were asking him to provide things to do with his employment that wasn't a problem prior, but because of some of the changes and some of the concerns in the market, they weren't willing to do his loan. He couldn't provide to them what they needed. So that was last week. He came to me. We got the appraisal transferred over, and we're going to have him close on the 6th of April.
Wow.
This last week. So that's some of the more recent craziness that we're seeing right now. So if you got anybody out there, anybody watching that thinks that their deal isn't getting done properly or there's some concern there, they can pick up the phone and call me and run through what's going on and see if we can't find a way to get the deal closed for them.
Well, and that's a great point, because sometimes when you're told no, it just doesn't necessarily mean it's completely no, there might be other options that like you're able to offer, whereas a USAA or a Navy Fed or someone else can't do. So I do always say we've had that happen on our team just recently. It's not every shoe fits every foot. So sometimes you have to look for a different pair of shoes, to fit your feet.
Sometimes it's a matter of creativity. And I've always said this about loan guidelines. Some of them are written black and white. Many of them are written in gray. And weaving in that gray area is crucial in many cases, even if and it has nothing to do with how perfect someone is from a credit standpoint, from a job standpoint. Every loan has its little quirks, and navigating that gray area, you can't leave it up to an underwriter. You have to have a good loan officer. The underwriter is going to read everything in black and white. And sometimes we got to convince them to read in between the lines and read in that gray area, and give them good reason to do that. And that's the key to a good loan officer, So. No,
definitely. No doubt. And one thing too, that people don't realize is that at the very end of the process, they do verify employment. So, because we've had that, well, we haven't had that happen, but I know someone who had that happen where they went to the verification of employment at the very end.
Yeah.
And they got laid off. So, and to your point about not buying anything, we usually give them we joke about the 10 commandments, thou shalt not, when you're going through the loan process. And, one of them is, buying all the furniture before you're moving into the house. And we had someone who purchased an expensive vehicle prior to closing, and that
they want that nice car to put. They want that nice car to put in that nice driveway. Just wait till after closing. Just wait till after closing.
Exactly. Well, we say, are you going to live in the front seat of the car? Because we're not sure you're getting the house, or the same thing with the furniture. You got a beautiful leather couch. You might be sleeping on that. So outside the house that you wanted to buy. So that's just a cautionary tale, especially now. I mean, a lot of people are online shopping. And so I don't know, Amazon still is delivering. So I don't know, they could deliver a giant couch, or I heard you could even get a brand new car delivered to your house too. So if you are thinking of buying, as a cautionary tale, please do not and refrain
Hey, if
from
you guys want to buy
doing
a
those.
car, I got connections, so let me know.
AJ's got car and taco connections. So, well, Zach, did we get any questions coming up, or have we been answering everything as we've been talking?
No, there wasn't any other questions. I think that it's been really, really great.
Yeah. So
great information, absolutely.
and it's ever changing. So if you want to get directly connected with Scott, forgive I'm near Quantico, and so I don't know what's flying over me right now. But Scott, how can people get in touch with you directly?
Best way is reach out to one of you guys and have you connect them to me. That's my preferred method because you guys are my referral partners, and I like to know where that customer saw me and is coming from, and make sure that we're connecting through the real estate agent.
Well, we appreciate that. And we appreciate everything that you do for all of our clients. And I hope everyone found this really useful information. I know I did, and it's an ever-changing thing. So we'll get updates from Scott as we go along, as the weeks pass. If things start really rapidly changing, we'll keep everyone updated. And if you have specific lending questions that you want us to ask Scott on your behalf, just comment on this or feel free to give us a direct message. We're happy to get those answers for you. So Scott, thank you so much for taking the hour to talk with us. We're calling this Live at 11, and hopefully that people found this informative. I know I sure did, and really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Scott.
All right. Bye, everyone. Have a great Monday, and we'll see you live at 11 on Wednesday. Take
Good
care.
sound.